is a stat that does appear to matter. How can he be rated below Ryan, who doesn't even make plays with his feet, who has been far more inconsistent? The passer rating's not close, and they've both had defensive coaches. He's had, Matt Smith. He's had Dan Quinn. It's not like one of them's had a brilliant offensive mentor. So how is Matt Ryan ahead of Russell Wilson? Let's start with that.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing to note is that they're really close. So there isn't much separating these two guys. And you're right, passer rating is an interesting number. It's indicative of a lot of things, but it's not necessarily a quarterback as much as it's a measure of the entire offense. So it's taking into account what the receivers do on the back end and even what coverage you're working against is, and it can be skewed. And Matt Ryan, for a lot of his seasons in the NFL, has kind of had bad interception luck. You think of the butt pick, a play that basically lands on the backside of a defensive back and gets picked off. He's had an awful lot of those plays that have ended up in interceptions, which drag his interception or his passer rating down, and I think paint an unfair picture of his overall play. But PFF grades these plays turnover-worthy plays. So whether it was an interception or not, it's getting a downgrade, and then also ones that were interceptions that shouldn't necessarily have been. And Matt Ryan has been one of the most careful players with the football in the entire decade, top 5 turnover-worthy play rate. And he's had seasons that didn't have, really bad Russell Wilson games that tended to punctuate his season until last year. I mean, last year, I think Wilson was legitimately an MVP level player, but every other season, there was always a bad Russell Wilson game just lurking around the corner, which tended to pull his grade down just a little bit.
Let me throw this out there. When you consider this, winning is not just about one player in the NFL, but quarterbacks do have a significant, they touch the ball every play. So they matter more than like a guard. Does winning matter? Outside of New England, Seattle has more playoff wins decade than everybody except the greatest coach and quarterback of all time. Is that any part of your valuation at PFF?
It is, but only indirectly. This list in particular, we're not focusing on wins specific, not diving into our metric, wins above replacement, PFF WAR. It's, for a start, it's created in a sort of position agnostic, all positions created equal way. So we're giving guards credit. If you're a dominant guard over your time in the past decade, you can rank ahead of some of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. If we were looking at just value and winning games, the list would be quarterbacks. It would be 1 to 50 quarterbacks, and that's not what we wanted to do. So, look, I'm not going to tell you that Russell Wilson is a bad player or that he's been anything less than spectacular, but everybody on this list was a phenomenal player in the past decade, and, it's about juggling all the different elements that go into this, and some guys end up a little bit further down the list than you might expect them to be.
Rob Gronkowski. Everybody loves Gronk. I love Gronk. But he missed 45 games in the decade. There was a time with Aaron Hernandez, people weren't sure he was as valuable as the late Aaron Hernandez. People thought he was the ultimate chess piece in the NFL. You could put him in the backfield. You could put him out wide. And that Gronk kind of hobbled the last 2 to 3 years in the NFL. You have him as the 5th best player in the decade. The injuries, the hobbling, how does he rank that high? I'm a fan of Gronk. I think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Right. And I mean, the injuries and the hobbling, those are the things that prevented him being number 1 or number 2 in this list. Like Rob Gronkowski, there are few players that had his consistent level of just absolute peerless dominance throughout the decade. He was as good as the best receiving tight ends in the NFL. Guys like Jimmy Graham that never blocked at all throughout the decade. Gronk was every the match of those guys and did it for longer. And then he was as good of a blocker as guys that were on the roster just for that role. Blocking specialist tight ends who are earning a living for 16 games going out there and basically playing auxiliary tackle. Gronk was as good as these guys were at just blocking. So you put those two things together, and he was this ultimate matchup weapon that nobody could deal with because they didn't have players that could be good in both facets of the game. You're right. The injuries, they were a problem. They were the thing that pulled him down. But that's what's stopping him from going down as being like literally one of the best players to ever play in the game, let alone a top 5 guy of the decade.
Aaron Rodgers, number 6, far ahead of Russell Wilson. He's been injured. There appears to be declines in the last 2 years. He has not really elevated young receivers like Russell Wilson. Would you at least acknowledge the best years of Aaron Rodgers do appear to be behind him?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what we're fighting against. You know, this recency bias of, look, 2019 and 2020, Russell Wilson is a dramatically better quarterback than Aaron Rodgers. But I think we're in danger of forgetting just how insane Aaron Rodgers was at his peak. You know, he was being talked about like Patrick Mahomes is being talked about now, the best talent to ever play the position. And his play, you know, which encompassed the entire decade, the back end of that 2010 season, the Super Bowl, his 2011 season, his 2014 season. I mean, his peak play was some of the best play I think we've ever seen anybody playing quarterback. And I think, you know, it's important not to forget just how good Aaron Rodgers was at his peak, even if he slipped away from that in the last couple of seasons.
By the way, where did you have Jarrett Stidham, who I'm told by Football Insiders is a magician? Where did you have him rank out of college?
Yeah, he wasn't a particularly highly ranked prospect for us coming out. We didn't entirely love the guy. His skill set, I don't think, is phenomenal. He's played okay in the preseason, and I think that's definitely something in his favor. But honestly, all the hype surrounding him right now, I think, is just a proxy for Bill Belichick. You know, we know that he's one of the greatest NFL coaches in history, and therefore we expect him to be able to replace Tom Brady and plug in Jarrett Stidham. And because he appears to be showing confidence in him, whether that confidence is designed at targeting Trevor Lawrence next season or not, because he's showing confidence in him, therefore we're trying to project. We're trying to figure out what Bill Belichick sees in Jarrett Stidham, and honestly, we don't know that it's there yet. We haven't seen evidence of it.
All right, Pro Football Focus has their top best players of the decade. Russell Wilson, to me, feels egregiously low, but that's what this is fun about. Sam Monson's joining us. Thank you, Sam. We appreciate you having the courage to deal with my arrows today. Thank you very much.
Anytime, sir. Next time we'll try and do a list that doesn't upset you as much.
Yes, thank you. That would make the world a better place to live. Am I outraged? Am I nutty on this?